We'll now take a look at John chapter 7, verses 1 through 13. The scene has been set now that Jesus has left Capernaum, which is where we find him in John 6, verse 59, and he's now traveling throughout Galilee. We don't have as much about Jesus' ministry in Galilee in John's Gospel as we do in the Synoptics, but it does recognize that Jesus did do some ministry in Galilee. But he is staying out of Judea, quote, because the Jews wanted to kill him. And so, again, the phrase the Jews is probably this author's way of describing Jewish authorities. And the Jewish authorities have perceived Jesus as guilty of violating the Sabbath and blaspheming by making himself equal to God. We were told this back in John 5:18 in connection with his healing on the Sabbath. The law stipulating that blasphemers are to be executed can be found in Leviticus 24, 15 through 16. So the Jewish authorities believe that they are acting upon the law as they understand it, and that even though Jesus did not claim, "I am God," he does seem to use God's in a somewhat frivolous way, because he seems to suggest that the work that he is doing is the work that God would do, and that seems to be enough for the Jewish authorities to judge him as a blasphemer. Now, whether or not other Jews would have judged such a statement as in the same category as blasphemy is something that's left up for the readers to decide. The setting of this conflict, really the whole of chapters 7 and 8, is near the time for the fall harvest festival, known as the Feast of Booths or of Tabernacles, which kind of recalls the Israelites wandering in the deserts and living in tents. And so in the fall, Jews would come and set up booths or set up tents, tabernacles as it were, and they would live in those for this period of time. It's a 7-day celebration, includes several different kinds of activities. Interestingly enough, there is a prayer for rain, so water, and sun, because it is a harvest festival, and there are prayers because they recognize that God provides both the rain and the sun, or the light, that is necessary for growth. And so this particular festival really emphasizes God's provision for his people in terms of the things that they need. We also see that there is a reading of Isaiah 12:3 and the portions of Zechariah 9:14. And this could be quite instructive and may have been very influential to the author of John's Gospel as he reflects upon what these texts say about the way in which God brings his salvation and how this salvation sometimes is connected to water. And certainly in John's Gospel, there's a lot of emphasis about water and the presence of water. There is a lighting of a candle, particularly in the court of women. There's a pouring of water that is drawn from the Gihon spring, which is near Siloam spring. And this water kind of a procession is made to go and to get the water and to bring the water back up to the altar and to pour this particular water onto the altar. Jesus' brothers are portrayed in these opening verses here as kind of taunting Jesus. He ought to go up to Jerusalem, and it's interesting that they say that he ought to go up there where Jesus' disciples are. So Jesus' disciples are in Judea, or Jesus has disciples in Judea. Now, it's not clear if the brothers mean the 12, he means Galilean disciples who have gone up to Jerusalem for this festival. If he means Judean disciples that Jesus has made because he has gone to Jerusalem. It's not clear who these disciples are, but that Jesus does have disciples that are there. And so they're taunting him to kind of go up there and perform his miracles or to show himself, and almost kind of as if the brothers look upon Jesus as someone who thinks of himself as something great, someone who's wanting to make a name for himself, and if he does, then he ought to go up to Jerusalem where all can see him. But Jesus is going to refuse to do so. I would just note that there in verse 4, it does look like it's not clear that the brothers have actually seen a miracle of Jesus, whether or not maybe they saw turning the water into wine, or maybe they've just heard about it, or maybe they've heard about other miracles that Jesus performed. I notice that in verse 4 it says, if you are doing these things. So these if you are doing these things suggest we've heard that you're doing these things. We may not have seen them, and we kind of doubt that you are doing it, but maybe other people think that you have. But certainly the brothers are not being portrayed here as true followers of Jesus. Blood is, as one author has put it, blood is not thicker than living water. So the brothers are not followers or believers in Jesus. When we look at the last verses here, verses 6 through 13, Jesus replies to his brothers' taunt that the world, and maybe by here he means the Jewish authorities, or just all those who do not believe in him, already hate him. Now that makes sense if it's the Jewish authorities, because they are trying to kill him. And so it would make sense for Gentiles who don't really want to kill Jesus or don't really hate him. They may not receive him or believe in him, but they don't hate him. And the reason why they hate Jesus is because he is a witness. He is testifying against their evil deeds. He's been pointing them out. And so they are responding to what he seems to be implying about them by trying to kill him or get rid of him. Jesus tells his brothers that the time for his revelation of his true identity has not yet arrived, and so he's not going to go up. But what we find out is that Jesus does go up, so maybe he means to tell his brothers, I'm not going up publicly. Or maybe it's Jesus is just simply being portrayed as one who doesn't follow the will of others. In other words, he's not going to go up because his brothers tell him, or he's not going to do things because other people tell him to do so. He only does things because God wants him. He acts according to the will of God, not the will of others. But he says he's not going up, but just in the very next couple lines, he does go up. But he goes up secretly. And it's not quite clear what is meant by secretly. Maybe he's not going up with other disciples. Maybe he's not making any kind of fanfare. Maybe he goes up by himself. Or maybe he does go with some, but it's not with any kind of preparation to speak or to teach or to minister. This is kind of a quiet, under the cover kind of expedition to go and to see. Maybe he knows what's going to take place. Doesn't tell us that he's going knowing what he will do, but he does seem to go up not to attract attention. And the people, though, are portrayed as divided on their opinion about Jesus. Certainly the Jewish authorities still are seeking him. Now, sometimes seeking Jesus can be a good thing, but in this case, seeking him is a bad one, since they want to kill him. And the people, though, are divided. So while these judges, these Jewish authorities, have judged Jesus, not everybody has the same judgment about Jesus. So some do think that he is a good man, showing that they don't really understand who Jesus is. And others that are claiming falsely that Jesus deceives the people, deceives others. And so people's opinions about him are divided. But no one is going to speak out. At least everybody is in a kind of agreement. The people that they fear are the Jewish authorities. And since the Jewish authorities want to kill Jesus, they don't want to say anything that will have the Jewish authorities direct their ire or their wrath against them. And so they keep quiet. So these people are not giving great testimonies about Jesus. They're not really projected as favorable. They're generally portrayed as either lacking understanding or downright deceptive or hateful. And that takes us then through John 7, 1 through 13.